Welcome to our viewers. Thanks so much for joining us for our webinar today, Unlock the Value of Your Media Asset Library While Locking Out Ransomware. Joining us today are David Phillips, Principal Architect here at CloudIan, and Dave Clack, CEO at CatDV, as well as Brian Shelley, Workflow Specialist also at CatDV. Welcome, David, Dave, and Brian. With that, I'll hand it over to David.
So the theme for this webinar, really taking a look at this transition that's going on in the media and entertainment industry as people reevaluate, their different storage categories and, what traditionally would have been, a legacy tape-based archive, trying to see, how can they get better utilization and better value out of the assets stored in that archive. And what we're, a lot of people are really finding is that transitioning to a kind of next generation cloud native model is really the way to kind of unlock, find all of that content, index it, tag it, be it by manual or automated means, and have it online and accessible from anywhere in the world. So with that, just kind of takes through a couple slides to really explain the CloudIan part of the solution, with our partners CatDV. So what is CloudIan? CloudIan HyperStore is our flagship product. It's a software-defined object storage platform that provides a native implementation of the S3 API. Like AWS S3, it utilizes a node-based storage cluster design that makes it easy to scale from hundreds of terabytes to hundreds of petabytes. The native S3 API combined with this easy scalability is what has made the solution popular with media and entertainment organizations as they transition from legacy tape-based archives to next-gen cloud-native active archives. So how does this work? Our product is essentially, you can think of it as AWS S3 service on-prem in your data center. Well, why would you do this? We find the primary drivers for customers, opting for a private cloud solution center on cost, performance, and security. CloudIan is more cost-effective over the long term than the public cloud for all those valuable assets that you own and you're storing for long term. Be it like 3 years to 30 years, storing them privately on your own resources is much more cost effective over those longer time spans. Also, because we're software defined, customers can deploy with their choice of commodity hardware. We sell appliances, which is a bundle of our software defined storage stack on top of commodity storage servers, but we also have customers who deploy on HP, Lenovo, Cisco, Supermicro. Because every node in the cluster services S3 API calls, we can offer superior performance across the local 10 gig or higher spec network, providing multiple gigabytes a second aggregate throughput. And because it's behind your firewall, you have complete control over the security profile. All of these benefits are presented via global storage namespace, your own private cloud storage URL that doesn't change even as you grow the cluster or refresh storage server hardware. Behind a global server load balancer, you can swap out hardware as it ages out or add new nodes to the cluster, and your private storage domain URL does not change. So data protection is a big part of any storage platform, and with CloudIan, we offer very flexible storage policies that provide data protection at a bucket by bucket level. So this can be start as simple as just providing replicas, or for higher efficiency you can utilize erasure coding. So this essentially allows you to kind of take you have a large media object asset and you can break that up, and this CloudIan service breaks that up into smaller fragments and then distributes those across all of the nodes in the storage cluster. So we can also extend these data protection schemes, storage policies, flexible data storage policies, not only to a single data center, but across multiple data centers and even the public cloud. So we're one of the few private object storage platforms that supports all three major public cloud vendors. So we can tier data via storage policy, be it time, last time accessed, or a set, time period, time duration. Data is tiered off of CloudIan and tiered to a public cloud service, where we have a lot of customers, for instance, who tier their valuable assets to Amazon Glacier because they don't have a second data center, but this allows them to have their master copies offsite in a secure location for disaster recovery. And our native S3 implementation allows that, this is essentially all still presented via your private S3 domain URL. So even if we tier data off to a public cloud, once you request that data back from the local CloudIan cluster, if we don't have it locally, we then retrieve it from the public cloud and stream it to the request. So when you combine all this together with CatDV, you really can, create a media workflow hub where, CatDV is orchestrating the kind of ingest and indexing and catalog, making proxies of all the media assets, holding all the metadata in its database about all the assets, be it the technical metadata about media file types, but also the custom metadata, that's project or organization specific. And then orchestrating the movement of data between the essentially CloudIan scalable storage cluster and any tier 1 storage that's used for high performance shared collaboration, real-time ingest, real-time playback, all those kind of high performance, low latency storage needs can be handled by the tier 1, and the deep content archive can be stored on CloudIan, cost-effective, scalable, accessible anywhere. So because security is so important these days, wanted to speak to the fact that because we serve federal and state and local governments, we've gone through a lot of rigorous certification and testing with our platform to provide. We've just been validated as a FIPS 140-2 level 1 certified solution for our cryptographic modules. So this means that we've, taken the steps of hardening our software code so that it is compliant with these very stringent federal standards. That combined with our new feature and our latest version of the software, we've just released S3 object lock support. So what this means is that once you create a bucket that's enabled with S3 object lock, as CatDV were to write objects to that bucket, they would become rendered immutable. So they would be essentially in a write once, read many mode. So any kind of ransomware attacks or any kind of malware that tries to encrypt your data, be it ransom or for malware destructive purposes, would be unable to modify those objects in that S3 object lock bucket. So, it seems like every, week brings new stories about not just, local governments, but media organizations that have been subject to ransomware attacks. And what we're seeing is that, especially in this COVID era, that the rate of ransomware attacks seem to be increasing year over year. So it's a kind of very important topic for a lot of customers that we talk about today. Is like, how can we protect our valuable media assets, that without having to take them offline, which traditionally you would have to do in a kind of tape-based air gap solution. So being able to still have them accessible online anywhere, but protected against these ransomware attacks. And with that, I will turn it back over to CatDV.
Right, so I'm Dave Flack, I'm CEO of Squarebox. Very pleased to be here. So what I'm going to do is just talk through what CatDV is and how it relates to the industry for those folks that maybe haven't come across us before. I'm going to try and do that fairly quickly and talk through these topics behind me. And then the main part of this demo, if you like, is going to be Brian, my colleague who's a workflow consultant with us, who's going to show some of this stuff working in live. So that's going to be the meat of the conversation, and I think the most interesting part. But still, it's worth covering what is CatDV, and thank you very much, David, for that introduction. I think that media hub concept is pretty cool, really. So, CatDV with best of breed primary storage and best of breed object and other tiered storage, that orchestration is one of the things we do best. So that's a neat way of putting it. So how do we describe ourselves? What's CatDV? So we're an advanced media management platform. Okay, cool. We can manage media. So I guess in the past we've been considered to be MAM, PAM, or DAM. So just being able to, so that's media asset management, production asset management, and digital asset management. So we can enable production teams to collaborate. We can help people to find and reuse their content, whether that's video, audio, stills, or other assets, projects, documents, PDFs, Illustrator files, whatever, FX, whatever. So we cover all of those things, but we don't box ourselves into any one of those categories, MAM, PAM, or DAM. More that we're a platform to be able to build media-centric applications that let teams organize, collaborate, and automate. And our automation engine is one of the best in the industry. We've got some differentiators, I think. We make easy things easy. So in a recent webinar, these are kind of workflows I could set up. Ingest, proxy creation, filing things on storage, extracting metadata from file and folder names. I'm not a techie, but I can do that stuff. And in fact, some years ago, I ran a webinar to do just that. And that's not the same as many of our competitors or other products in the field. So easy things are easy, but then hard things are possible. So you don't run out of runway with CatDV. So with our APIs, with our ability to customize CatDV, and that's make new user interfaces, add new functions to CatDV, and really make the platform your own, then that really makes it quite different. So it's quite difficult to be both making easy things easy and hard things possible. And I think we walk that tightrope, or at least we try to. One of the other things that we think is quite different about ourselves is that we are well connected, and part of the reason we're here on a platform with another best of breed product is because we think that is really important. So we think our customers can get massive value by choosing best of breed across their workflows, and storage is clearly a big part of that. And we've got maybe, last time I checked, it was more than 100. I had to kind of scratch my head and hardly believed it, but when I saw the list, yeah, we do have more than 100 integrations with other partners, storage, networking, transcoding, QC, the list goes on and on and on. Oh, and we're cost effective because everything's always about money at the end of the day. So we used to have a strap line, the $1 million MAM that doesn't cost $1 million. I think maybe the $1 million MAM that needn't cost $1 million, because we can certainly go large in scale is probably what we might say these days. So that's kind of in a nutshell what CatDV is, or at least aspires to be. What do we do? You'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to read all these out, but one of the messages, I guess, is we do quite a lot of stuff, right? So we help post teams collaborate. So, for example, one of our case studies and a lot of our market research says that we can return about 20% of the creative effort back to the team to do more stuff, because they're not messing around finding files and moving files and transcoding, because we can automate it. And we have a great case study with Weta Workshop, the folks behind Avatar and Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And they've got a team that is saying, yeah, we're getting those savings. We get a day back per person per week by using CatDV. So post collaboration, big thing we do. Sports, we are the leader in sports asset management. So for fan engagement and for heritage, particularly during lockdown, being able to find and reuse content from previous seasons is increasingly important for those organizations that have already chosen CatDV. We're big in that. We have a number of major news networks that are with us. Our biggest CatDV solution is deployed across 30 stations in a large news conglomerate. We have a set over here a news station over here that has 12 different local stations all rolling up with 70 years worth of history, 7 million assets, and a really successful project under our belt. And you can read some of these other ones, archival and masters management, being able to store content so it's super safe, immediately content arrives. That's really relevant here when talking about being able to use CloudIan's and immutable object locking. So you can imagine getting your camera originals in and wanting to immediately preserve them and make sure that they could never get corrupted. That kind of workflow is really important in the content creation business. But then all of this stuff means that it's showing that everybody has media, whether it's corporate, events, government, military. Yeah, in certain parts of the country, if you get caught speeding from traffic camera footage, that's all in CatDV. Corporates, education, we have many universities that use CatDV. So anybody that has video, audio, stills, wants to be able to use it collaboratively across their organization to engage with their stakeholders, that's what we help with, and these are a few examples, if you like. What are the things that CatDV does in those organizations? And again, I won't talk through all of these. So the life cycle of a media asset, being able to index it, preserve it, enrich it with metadata, whether that be using AI tools manually or from metadata that already exists in the file or on the file system, clipping, tagging, all of that, social media, sharing of that content. So that's kind of core workflows, being able to ingest and know where content is, no matter what storage tier it's on, no matter what location it's in. That's a big workflow for CatDV. Review and approve, transcodes, media lifecycle management, distribution. And then there's a few behind me moving out the way. Then, we're pretty flexible in terms of how we deploy, what languages we deploy in, and such like. So CatDV can do quite a lot of stuff, and our APIs, that's more at the end, our APIs mean that it can do almost anything you can imagine using the hooks we build in to let people extend the out-of-the-box capabilities. Moving on. Who uses it? I've mentioned we're leaders in sports asset management, so we have more of the NFL, NBA than anybody else. We're big in soccer, esports, gaming, MotoGP, use CatDV with a large system that goes around in a big crate around the world for motorbike racing internationally. We have several major news organizations, some of which I can't name, but the ones we can, is ITV here in the UK. We have more than 50, I think probably maybe even more than 100 universities and colleges that use us for education, for student engagement, and for outreach to potential students and affiliates. Loads of major corporates, again, for education. How do you prove you've given a certain person some training? Well, you can use CatDV for that. Non-profits in the house of worship, as well as in the charity sector. Hundreds of production teams. Yeah, anybody who has video could use our stuff. So that's our kind of mini pitch on what is CatDV and what can it do. The specific piece of what is CatDV and what it can do, what we're talking about today, are some workflows with CloudIan. And I guess we're going to talk mainly about 3. So typical workflow, new content arrives and we want to protect it. New content arrives maybe on a local SAN. We want to protect it and store it safely on the CloudIan system. And so we want to be able to do that manually, but then we also want to be able to do that in an automated fashion so that it's super simple for the folks that are engaging with that content. And they don't have to think about where that content is. They just say, I want it, give it to me. So we kind of make that technical landscape kind of transparent to users, so they just get the files they want when they need them. And then a new piece of capability that we introduced earlier this year is the ability to index object-based storage. And so for those existing CloudIan customers who have a lot of content already stored on CloudIan object storage and would like to understand more about what it is and how to engage with it and share it amongst other folks in the team, then we can ingest content that's already stored on the CloudIan solution and make it visible and more accessible, searchable, taggable using CatDV. So that is what we're going to show. I will now get out of the way and let Brian do all the cool stuff.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. And thanks everyone for joining today. I'm hoping my microphone is unmuted. Great. So we're super excited to be working with Cloudian. You know, we have a lot of customers who they utilize some form of cloud-based object storage like Amazon S3. And for years now, we've had native plugins available for CatDV, which bring the ability to control movement of assets to and from an object-based S3 compatible location. You know, they allow you to have that sort of control. But one question that comes up a lot is, well, how much would it cost? You know, we want to use our CatDV stuff with Amazon, but we're concerned about the Amazon costs. And so, you know, using the CloudIan HyperStore, you know, that lets you bring a lot of that stuff in-house. So what I'll be showing you today is, you know, sort of what that media workflow hub David described might look like in real world. So we're going to dive down the rabbit hole here, and I'm not kidding when I say that, because it shows the browser screen too, but here we go. Let's get this out of the way. So to start, I'd like to actually start in our latest web client. This is our Web3 web client, and just show you that you know, out of the box, once we hook this up to a CloudIan HyperStore, I could just say I want to select a file. I don't know. Here's Barack Obama giving out some speeches here, and I could say right within CatDV natively, out of the box, that I want to be able to copy or move these files up to Cloudian. Let's go ahead and copy them. And we'll see that we've initiated the transfer of 3 files, and you can see they've already flown up there in the background. Now, that was a little quick, but here, right within the software, we have the ability to manage those jobs, so to be able to track, you know, not just 3, but maybe 3 or 30,000 of these jobs, and seeing what their statuses are, resubmitting as necessary. So we have that sort of natively built into the software. And of course, once something is pushed or pulled, we would be able to restore, or if we wanted to purge the local files. So that's built into the software, and that's great. But you know, if you know CatDV, you know it's really all about automations. So what I'd like to show now, I'm going to move to another catalog. Matter of fact, I'm going to move over to our desktop client to do this. If it will let me. There we go. So here is where we would hook up to our CatDV worker node. Here I've got some local content here. We can see using with our live online indicators here that this is full res media on disk. But what I'd really like is to push it up to Cloudian. Now, by making a simple metadata panel entry here, I'm able to have a live status showing me whether something is on or off Cloudian. And I think you can already see that if users need a curated view of these workflows, it's really possible to spin that up in CatDV in no time at all. So why don't I go ahead and push this clip up to Cloudian. The CatDV worker is watching for these requests, and you can see already it's getting hard to work. And so the way I've configured this is that we are using Cloudian sort of as a second tier, but an equal citizen in terms of storage, and that we are moving laterally from our high-speed SAN storage over to our Cloudian HyperStore. So that file is there, and now if I refresh, you'll see our little live status indicator is on Cloudian. So that's a really basic sort of push-pull workflow, and it's powered by our worker node here. But again, you know, as my Dave was mentioning, if you wanted to have something set up where the worker node, upon indexing of a file, were to put it straight onto Cloudian, hey, that's no problem. We can do that. Our powerful workflow designer here lets you add, you know, these sort of Cloudian movements into any workflow. So for instance, here's, you know, this very simple push-pull workflow I've got set up. Simply checks to see which of these buttons the user checked, and then does the appropriate task accordingly. We can even control which buckets and locations we go to. So if you want to take advantage of that S3 object locking that David mentioned, we can send it straight to a locked bucket if the conditions are right. Okay, so we've looked at the built-in tools, and we've looked at the automations a little bit, but I'm not quite done here in worker node actually, because as our Dave mentioned, we've got now the ability to index content directly from a remote volume. So here in our latest release of worker node, by the way, everything you see here is in the currently shipping software. Here I was able to define, just like any other volume path that we would use within the system, the CloudIan HyperStore as my endpoint. So from here, we can actually, right within worker, we can browse the CloudIan HyperStore. And matter of fact, I've also got, just so we can do a little live comparison here, the CloudIan management console. So this comes with the software, and it gives you a web front end to the to the system. And here, if we go browse up, I should be able to see there's those Obama talks. So God willing, the creek don't rise, there they are. So we can see we can browse those remote files right within Worker. But browsing is only one piece of the puzzle. So I'll go ahead and actually kick off a remote ingest. I've got a workflow set up to watch not that folder, but another folder on Cloudian. Isn't that cool? I mean, if you've ever worked with S3 buckets, you know that getting to the stuff can be so finicky sometimes. So having a simple file watch action, which I'm going to trigger now, which could go ahead and I'm just going to move here to our blank ingest catalog. And what we should see, there we go. There's those files in that Cloudian bucket popping into that catalog right there. So I know this is all moving a little quick, but what happened there is that Worker node went, scanned the folders that we set in the Cloudian bucket, which in that case I think was this guy. I have a little Cloudian folder, and there it is. So it scanned just this folder and brought that into the catalog of my choosing. So in just a few minutes, we've gone over that. We've got a deep integration to S3 object storage. Therefore, out of the box, we can talk to Cloudian because Cloudian, they speak S3 as well. We've shown that using our CatDV worker node, we can push powerful automations, not just to say move this file or that file, but depending on the status of a project or a checkbox or, hey, even what time of day it is, we can have these movements working for you automatically. Finally, we showed that we can look at media that you might already have on a CloudIan HyperStore or other object-based storage, and we can bring that into CatDV, making these storages, even though they are technically second tier, into first-class citizens. So with that, I'll stop my presentation and hand it back to the fine folks at CloudIan to field any questions.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as well. So that's cool. And we decided to make this as snappy as possible, just to give a glimpse of what's possible with CatDV and Cloudian working together. Behind the scenes, whenever those movements were going on, CatDV was keeping a big audit record of exactly what had been done by who and when, and what the resulting status was that Cloudian told us about. So in terms of being certain about workflows, which certainly if we're talking about immutable archives and object locking, being certain that content has been stored in the right way is really important. And I think, so that's the first point. We keep a good audit trail of all the moves and the changes that we make or initiate from our side. Yeah, and then secondly, being able to, where was I going? Oh, senior moment. Yeah, being able to, so if you've got an immutable archive, being able to archive the same asset multiple times using CatDV rules so that the CatDV doesn't just fail when you say, I want to archive it again. It'll make a second version of it in Cloudian so that you can be sure that all the versions you'd say should be stored do actually get stored out. So yeah, that's where I was going. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Excellent. Thanks, David, Dave, and Brian for your time today, and our audience for joining us as well. We do have some time for questions. Be sure to enter these at this time into the questions tab at the bottom of the screen if you haven't already done so. I also wanted to point out again that we have included content in the attachments tab at the bottom of your screen, so be sure to check this out as well. With that, I'll move into our first question. Yeah, and actually, in terms just as we do, just in terms of kind of next steps, I guess. Let me just push this up. Then, so just so folks who might be dropping off as questions are going on, so we do have some next steps that we'd like to suggest from both the Cloudian and CatDV side. If you have heard stuff that's interesting, then do reach out to the Cloudian team at Cloudian.com. And then on the CatDV side, then we will be putting up a one-to-one booking session up. The link will be out in the follow-up email. At the moment, that's to be confirmed is not the real link. So we'll have a to be confirmed link so you can book up a one-to-one to talk about these kind of workflows and CatDV working with Cloudian next week if you want to, or you can contact any of us at sales@squarebox.com and we would be very happy to chat. I always do a plug for our weekly show. Next week's show is going to be about CatDV and deployment on Docker, so even more flexible ways of being able to deploy CatDV in addition to Mac, Windows, Linux, and so very much more cloud and hybrid friendly. So, yeah. So thanks, Audrey. Sure. Thanks for those announcements, Dave. Appreciate it. Okay, I'll move into our first question now. Cool. How can customers get started with a CatDV and Cloudian workflow?
Well, yeah, when that link comes out, book your one-to-one, and then genuinely we're there to help. And as Brian said as well, it is a native CatDV integration, so it's a question of installing your CatDV server-based system, putting our integration on, and then having your S3 credentials. I mean, so Brian, I mean, can you just talk about what you had to do to set up the stuff for the demo today?
Yeah, I mean, well, certainly having the help from the folks at CloudIan was great. But once CloudIan is deployed, either on-prem or in the cloud, you'll have an endpoint. So you enter your endpoint and your S3 credentials into our native plugin, and then you say which bucket you'd like, and all of that out-of-the-box stuff I showed you at the beginning is already there. So it's really not hard.
Yeah.
If you're a CloudIan customer and you want to get into CatDV, we can pull down the CloudIan stuff. And if you're a CatDV customer interested in CloudIan, we can go that way too. Sorry, David.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think what we find in talking to customers, every customer environment is has its differences and unique characteristics, and also as far as their kind of like asset library, their content library, they're sometimes at different points in this transition, and so CatDV's flexibility of being able to, okay, this is a greenfield project. We're going to start from asset 001, and then go through our catalog and do a managed kind of migration, ingest into CatDV, migration to CloudIan. That's great. Being able to automate that even better. Lots of customers in the speed of production and the chaos of production, they just need to back their stuff up quickly. Their main storage is filling up. We need to kind of offload this to clear space. So, being able to index in place, and then organize later is, that really kind of meets the kind of real world production environments that you tend to come across.
Great, thanks everyone for that. I'll move into our next question. Can a CatDV worker perform other operations on cloud-based media besides just indexing it?
Oh yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay, he's pointing to me. So, yes, actually, a bit of an admission is that we showed you a little more than just indexing today. Worker node can dynamically, just when it's needed, pull those files down so that it can do things like proxy generation, transcoding, subclipping, thumbnail generation, and in terms of other file movement-based workflows, well, what happens is we get a little file path piece, and this, I showed it to you, it was called, CloudIan in the square brackets, and we can use that as an equal citizen to any other file path in the system. So if we wanted to say, have someone drop something on the folder in the SAN and that goes up to CloudIan, well, there's not a whole lot of extra work required to do that. It's just another piece, another step in a worker workflow. So absolutely, more than just indexing, we support transcoding, dynamically downloading files as they're needed for media analysis, and all other sorts of file movement operations.
Yeah, and you can throw things out to QC with some of our QC integrations. You could even perform some of the limited QC that CatDV does itself about the frame size and the frame rate, matching what's actually in the picture versus what it's reporting in the metadata. We can send stuff up to one of our AI providers for speech to text. Maybe you've got some stuff in CloudIan from a digitization project, and you've got a whole pile of just high quality media. You've baked your tapes, you've got your content, last chance stuff, but how do you unlock the potential in it? You want to run it through some kind of AI indexing before letting humans look at it to try and just make it time effective. So almost, with the CatDV workflows, almost any workflow you can do with CatDV in the worker can be triggered with a CloudIan ingest or an ingest from SAN and push to CloudIan. So yes, very much so, yeah.
I think this one's to CatDV again. Are there any per user limits or gotchas in terms of licensing?
Probably, yeah. So I should answer that. It's a commercial one, isn't it? So look, we believe we are the most cost-effective asset management platform on the planet. We think we can be very flexible to match the investment required in CatDV with the business benefits it's going to deliver. So, that means that if there's a special case, we'll listen to good justifications about specials, if you like, particularly at the moment when we know that the industry is challenged with lockdown and uncertainty about production schedules and all of that. So I think we are more, I know for a fact, we're more creative commercially than other vendors out there. Then also we do think we've got a CatDV to suit any budget. We have CatDV standalone, which gets people to dip a toe in the water, and it's less than $1,000, for a perpetual license. We have small tier systems, mid tier systems, and large tier systems. Our biggest customer has spent more than $1 million with us, so we did lose the $1 million man strat line because we have a $1 million customer. But that's the outlier. We're finding that we can add incredible amounts of value to customers that are used to paying $1 million or $1 million per year even. But at the same time, if folks have a few tens of $1,000s and their problem is costing them $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 a year, then we've got something to be able to contribute there too. So I think it's quite an unusual product in that regard, that we can try and tailor what we've got to the budgets that our customers.
Okay.
I think it's worth noting, sorry, I'm just going to add on to that.
Go for it.
Noting though that by partnering with some folks like CloudIan, users and organizations who are concerned about large egress fees from cloud, this would be a solution that we could help on.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah. Sorry.
No worries. I think next one goes to CloudIan. Does CloudIan have to be used as a second tier or archive grade storage?
So, as Brian kind of demonstrated, we're moving from this idea of like object storage is this, archive tier that you don't interact with. It's all cold storage, to really being kind of central to the workflow. In fact, as remote productions around the world, becomes the kind of the norm, no longer like FedExing, a USB hard drive back to HQ to have it, ingested into the SAN, then backed up onto the tape library. But in fact, like we need to archive this valuable media assets, these CAM originals, directly to our cloud storage, which is essentially our archive repository, our long-term, archive. And then, be able to trigger the other parts of the workflow, making proxies, making edit media, presenting essentially a portal for viewing dailies and all that kind of stuff. Excuse me. So no, it's, we're finding that, there's always a need for that high performance tier 1 storage. You need a real-time, low latency storage for ingest, real-time play out, highest speed, transcoding, and things like that. But for, 80% of all the unstructured, data, all of the media assets, of the different versions and different categories, having them on a scalable, cost-effective platform is really where the industry is moving.
Yeah, and if I can add to that a little bit as well, just thinking about the workflows that we're seeing in the world at the moment. So particularly when people are working remotely and from home, then we have some tools in CatDV that say, okay, I go into Adobe Premiere. I've got my Adobe Premiere panel, and the buttons you saw that Brian was pushing in the CatDV desktop application, well, they're there in the web applications and in our mobile applications and in our Premiere panel. So from your Premiere panel, you can see you've got some media. You can see the high res is offline. You say, okay, bring that back online, please, and it'll move it from CloudIan to the SAN. But I'm at home on my Adobe workstation. What do? Well, so our latest Premiere panel lets you bring down the proxies from CloudIan to our Premiere workstation. And so you can do a local proxy-based edit on your local laptop at home, your local workstation at home. And when you're done, you check that project back into CatDV, and a Premiere workstation or an Adobe Media Encoder connected to your SAN can then do the render. We just drop the Adobe project file into a AME watch folder, and it'll render stuff out with the settings you give it, right? So there are all sorts of almost tier zero if you count the developer workstation as the tier 0 that needs access to the media, tier 1 SAN, tier 2, 3, or whatever for CloudIan, and then native cloud stuff. Using CatDV as that media hub means that the person sitting there at their workstation just says, just get me my media. I just want to do my job. Thank you. It's all very well having all this really cool storage and all that, but a creative person doesn't care how we organize all that good stuff and be cost effective and safe and secure. They just want to get their content made. And with a solution like CatDV and Cloudian together, we can make that stuff really easy and cost effective and safe and secure without getting in their way, if you like.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. There's one more question for today. Can media be automatically backed up to Cloudian with no user interactions?
Brian, you take that.
Yeah, I mean, it's automation is where, that's what CatDV is bringing to these media workflows, is that automation level, including backing up multiple instances, for valuable, like camera original source assets. In addition, I do want to also kind of note, having the flexibility of, you have a CatDV worker automation. CatDV can take care of I want to immediately back up a copy of this asset to Cloudian for long-term, archive. But I also want to create an instance in the public cloud, because the rule of data protection really is you need to have at least one copy offsite, in cases of disaster recovery. And users have a lot of flexibility and choice in able to achieve those goals. Number one, Cloudian, through its own tiering policies, auto tiering, we can, we have a bridge, what's called bridge mode, where we can automatically make a copy up to the public cloud. And that way, there's a single URL for wherever that instance lives. Customers might also have, workflow requirements where they want CatDV to manage that, keeping track of where every instance of the media is. I want, one copy on Cloudian, I want one copy to go off to tape, and I want one copy up to Amazon Glacier or, some, kind of infrequent access, low cost disaster recovery category.
Perfect. So yeah, that concludes our questions for the day. And if you do have any open questions, please be sure to reach out to us. You can also find more information on our websites that are listed on this slide, CloudIan.com and Squarebox.com. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us, and thanks again to David, Dave, and Brian for the informative presentation today. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.